Germany's Black Forest contains forests older than the Roman Empire, located within an hour of Autobahn sections where there is no legal speed limit. The castle that became the model for Disney's Sleeping Beauty was not adapted from fiction. It was built in the Bavarian Alps in the 19th century by a Bavarian king, and Disney borrowed from it, not the other way around. For 28 years, a concrete wall divided Germany's capital city through its center. These are not contradictions Germany has resolved, they are the conditions it has learned to occupy simultaneously. The country has more than 20,000 castles and castle ruins, more than any other nation. The Moselle Valley's vineyards trace a tradition the Romans established over 2,000 years ago, and those same hillsides still produce wine today. The Cologne Cathedral, one of the most visited buildings in Europe, took 632 years to complete. Germany is also among the most environmentally regulated economies in Europe, having phased out nuclear power and operating a national reforestation program planting 100 million trees annually. The term Waldsterben, forest death, was coined in Germany in the 1980s in response to acid rain damage to its forests. The country that built the world's most famous unrestricted highway also developed the vocabulary for ecological collapse. Füssen sits at the southern edge of the Bavarian plain, where the terrain gives way abruptly to the Alps. The name translates from German as feet, a reference to the town's position at the base of the mountains. The Lech River runs through the town in a pale turquoise from glacial melt, passing through a narrow gorge below an 11th century castle and a Baroque church district whose painted merchant facades date from the medieval period. The town was a significant stop on the Via Claudia Augusta, the Roman road connecting the Adriatic to the Danube, and remained a trading waypoint for centuries. By the 16th century, it had become an unlikely center of violin making. Luthiers trained in Füssen eventually established workshops across Europe, and the instruments produced there shaped the sound of Baroque chamber music. The town sits 12 kilometers from Neuschwanstein and receives a fraction of that castle's visitors. Its streets are largely unaltered. The Königssee extends 7 kilometers through a valley flanked by rock faces that drop directly into the water. Motorized boats are prohibited on the lake, and the crossing is made in electric vessels. The water is among the clearest in Germany, and the surrounding mountains retain snow year-round. Above the valley, at an elevation of 1,834 meters, is the Kehlsteinhaus, known in English as the Eagle's Nest, constructed in 1938 as a diplomatic reception building and presented to Hitler for his 50th birthday. He visited 14 times. Today, it operates as a restaurant and historical site. The Bavarian state chose preservation over demolition, specifically for its educational function. The salt mines below Berchtesgaden have been active since 1517. 5 centuries of continuous extraction from the same mountain made the town a significant center of trade during the medieval period. The valley today contains both a national park and one of Bavaria's largest tourism operations, a pairing the region has not fully reconciled. The Schwarzwald covers 6,000 square kilometers in southwestern Germany. The Romans referred to it as Silva Nigra, the dark wood, because the silver fir canopy is dense enough to block most direct light at ground level. The forest floor remains cooler than surrounding areas even in summer, and the microclimate generated by the tree mass produces its own rainfall patterns, with interior valleys receiving significantly more precipitation than the surrounding region. Villages within those valleys have operated continuously for 500 years, producing clocks, glasswork, and distilled spirits. The cuckoo clock was developed in the Black Forest in the 18th century by craftsmen working through the winter months when agricultural work paused. It became one of the most widely exported German craft objects in history. The Black Forest's geography, its depth, its light conditions, its relative isolation made it a practical setting for folklore about paths, forests, and disorientation. The connection between the landscape and that body of literature is geographic as much as it is cultural. Some sections of the Autobahn carry no speed limit, and vehicles have been recorded there at over 400 kilometers per hour on public roads. Germany is also among the most environmentally regulated economies in Europe. It has phased out nuclear power and operates a national reforestation program, planting 100 million trees annually. The term Waldsterben, forest death, was coined in Germany in the 1980s in response to acid rain damage to its forests. The country that built the world's most famous unrestricted highway also produced the vocabulary for ecological collapse. Berlin does not resemble a conventional European capital. It spreads across a flat plain, its districts separated by water and parkland, its skyline low and irregular. The Brandenburg Gate was constructed between 1788 and 1791 as a neoclassical monument at the western edge of the city center. From 1961 to 1989, the Berlin Wall ran directly adjacent to the gate, placing it within the death strip between East and West Berlin. Neither side could access it. For 28 years, a structure whose function is passage was unreachable. Following the fall of the wall in November 1989, 1.3 kilometers of the original barrier were preserved along the Spree River as the East Side Gallery. In 1990, artists from over 20 countries painted its panels. The murals have faded considerably since then. The preserved section remains the longest open-air gallery in the world. The city's post-war reconstruction proceeded unevenly. Large sections of East Berlin remained underdeveloped after reunification in 1990, and those areas became sites for galleries, clubs, and cultural institutions occupying warehouses and industrial buildings that the commercial property market had not yet absorbed. That pattern has continued. Much of Berlin's cultural infrastructure is housed in structures built for other purposes. Frankfurt's skyline is the most concentrated in continental Europe, a cluster of glass towers on the main river housing the European Central Bank and the primary institutions of European finance. The city processes a significant share of European financial transactions and serves as the region's primary aviation hub. Within its borders, the city contains the architecture of medieval commerce, 19th century literary culture, post-war reconstruction, and contemporary European finance, with little physical distance between them. Rothenburg ob der Tauber is among the best preserved medieval towns in Europe. Its walls, gates, and half-timbered buildings date primarily from the 14th through 17th centuries and have remained structurally intact. The town's streets and market square function as they have for centuries, as a commercial center for a small, enclosed municipality. The medieval fabric has not been interrupted by modern construction within the walls. The Moselle River runs approximately 544 kilometers from its source in the Vosges Mountains to its confluence with the Rhine at Koblenz. Through the Rhinish Slate Massif in Germany, it follows a series of pronounced meanders, tight bends that extend the river's course well beyond the straight-line distance between points. Kochum is a small town on the Moselle between Koblenz and Trier. The Reichsburg, the castle above the town, was constructed in the 11th century, largely destroyed during the 9 Years' War in 1689 and rebuilt in Neo-Gothic style between 1868 and 1877. The reconstruction followed historical plans but incorporated 19th century architectural conventions. The vineyards on the surrounding slopes produce wines traded under appellations that trace to the medieval period. The valley's wine culture, physical geography, and infrastructure of small towns and river traffic have remained largely consistent across centuries of political change. Germany's defining characteristic is not any single landscape or event, but the degree to which different periods coexist within it without resolution. Roman vineyards still in production, medieval towns still functioning as commercial centers, a divided capital reunified within living memory, an economy that industrialized faster than almost any other alongside some of the most stringent environmental regulations in Europe. These layers were not worked through, they accumulated, and they remain visible, intact, and operating in parallel. Germany's geography and historical record make it one of the more varied countries in Europe to document. From the Alpine south to the Baltic coast, from the Rhine plain to the forested interior, the landscape and its associated history shift considerably across a compact area. Subscribers receive similar coverage of other regions as it is released. Comments are open for requests on particular locations or topics to cover in future episodes.